Do you consider yourself a high achiever? Smart, driven, highly successful? I am so excited to have you. My name is Julia Arndt and I'm the host of the Stress Podcast. I will help you develop your stress resilience the same way you've developed your workplace superpowers. Learn peak performance tools to thrive at work and in your personal life. Let's get started. Hi everyone and welcome back to Stressed. I'm super excited to have a really wonderful podcast guest on the show today. Hi Manuel, how are you?
I'm awesome. Glad to be here.
Yes. I'm always starting my podcast with the question, tell us a little bit about where you are located, what time zone you're in. So what time is it right now? And what have you been up to this morning?
So I am located in Saratoga Springs, New York. So that's Eastern time. It's 1:18 right now. And, today's been a fairly typical Thursday for me. Thursdays in the morning from 7 till about 11, I see patients. And I had a coaching client right before we came on to talk together.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so tell us more about you. You're already talking about patients and coaching clients. So tell us a little bit more about what you do.
So I'm a psychiatrist and I've been in psychiatric practice for, well over 20 years. And I see adults for the general practice of psychiatric medicine. And about 12 years ago, I got very burnt out and I decided that I needed to do something besides just psychiatry. And I wasn't sure what that was going to be. So for 12 years, I've been exploring things. And over the last 3 years, I've centered in on helping entrepreneurs who are financially successful and independent, but they found that they have gotten burnt out and it's exhausting them. It's hurting their relationships and their business. And I help them to get back to flourishing so that they can be successful in their personal and professional lives.
That's great. And is that similar to what you do in your psychiatric practice or?
So the psychiatric practice is more medical.
More like the classical sense.
Yeah. So depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder. And these are people who are coming in specifically for medication treatment and evaluations. And that's done with their medical insurance and all of that. The coaching incorporates what I know about how humans work, which I've had a lot of time to practice. It incorporates my own personal struggles with burnout. So in coaching, I can talk about my own life much more than I can in my practice of psychiatry. With psychiatry, we don't tend to self-disclose with very good reasons to our patients. But when I do coaching and when I come onto podcasts, I can very freely talk about, I've had burnout, I've had problems with depression, I've had problems with alcoholism. So my mental health background, my own journey, and then I'm also an entrepreneur. So all three things come into play when I'm doing my coaching.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, when you are obviously helping people with anxiety and depression, that is basically burnout, right? So helping entrepreneurs with that, I'm sure gives you a lot of things.
Yeah, and it's a little bit different. So with, the clinical illness of depression and anxiety is not quite the same thing as burnout. Some of the symptoms overlap, but the burnout was recognized as an occupational syndrome by the World Health Organization a couple of years ago. And the three parts of it that they talk about is there's a feeling of exhaustion that you have. There's a sense that you're no longer being as effective in your work. And in fact, you're having a harder time with your work. And then there's a bitterness or cynicism that starts to creep into your life that's not pre-existing there. So you get kind of snarky and like really bitter. And I had all of those. When we talk about the illness of depression and anxiety, they have more symptoms that are required. And there's usually a bigger impact on functioning as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much for differentiating that again. I think, I think it's really helpful to know that. I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression in 2018. And I think it was really interesting to see like the questionnaires and, to understand what burnout is and what the overlap is between the three, to understand that there's there's overlap and, there's symptoms that come up.
Right. And if we don't tend to things, right, they get worse and worse. So with burnout, if you don't take care of it, then at some point you have something that's more like depression and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the challenge is that the way that we look at work as entrepreneurs is that we solve a lot of our problems by just working harder, right? So if there's and in the long run, that doesn't work for very long. We can only work so long without burning out and having problems, like with any piece of machinery.
Yeah.
And that's what I like to talk about a lot is, how do we replenish and how do we put happiness back into our lives as a central organizing principle? How are we happy and then flourish in work in our lives?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And do you feel like when you are working with people and entrepreneurs specifically that they burn out multiple times before they actually take more drastic measures to make changes in their lives?
Yeah, it can take a while. How we tend to work as humans is that we will accommodate to our current circumstances. So all of a sudden I feel terrible, and then I get used to feeling terrible. If I don't do anything, that just becomes the new normal.
Yeah.
And then it gets worse. And then, that's terrible, but it becomes a new normal. And it keeps getting worse until we hit some sort of a bottom. And that bottom can be, a significant other telling us, hey, there's something going on. It can be that we can't get out of bed in the morning. I mean, the bottom can be different, but that accommodation, what we want is people to recognize that something's wrong early on and be able to make changes in their lives much earlier, because otherwise, like you said, it just gets worse and worse, and you have multiple bouts of it, feeling worse.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just thinking of a podcast guest that I had at the beginning of the year. His name is Eric. And he's a performance coach now as well, but he worked many years in consulting and started his own businesses as an entrepreneur. And he actually had a heart attack on an airplane, and they had to land the airplane. He was 35 or 36 years old at the time only. And that was not his bottom. He actually said that after that, he continued the work, the way of how he was working, but then his wife came and was like, I'm gonna divorce from you if you're not starting to make any changes. And that was then his that was like that significant other that came in and said, okay, something needs to change. But yeah, it's very interesting that everyone needs something different for them to have that click, right?
Right. And part of what we do when we start, so what you're doing is very, very meaningful. So when we're able to have conversations in which we talk about, these are the signs and symptoms that things are not going right. And what we allow people to do is to, ideally to recognize faster and faster that there's something that's not right, and I don't have to live like this, right? There's hope, change is possible, and I don't have to be alone with my problems. So as people become more aware, the goal is that those bottoms don't have to be heart attacks and broken families, right?
Yeah, exactly.
we catch that earlier, like I'm exhausted, I don't feel good, and work is not satisfying, and I'm getting really bitter. That's enough. I can make changes faster, sooner.
Yeah. When you are working with entrepreneurs in your coaching practice, what do you see are their biggest maybe mistakes that they make to slide into that burnout stage?
Almost always it's the working harder rather than working different. And the problem with high performers is that they're like an athlete, and they like to work hard. They feel best when they're working hard, and they take on a lot of the responsibilities for the success of the organization. And with a high-performing athlete, a lot of times what a coach is doing is teaching them to slow down. Like you can't sprint and go hard at every single workout. Like we have to be much more strategic with that. So with high performers, they're oftentimes working with this sense of, I'm not good enough, and There's an imposter syndrome. So the way that we compensate is just to kind of, always be working hard. And part of the challenge is to learn that, slowing down is really how you speed up in the long run, rather than keep speeding up so someday I can slow down.
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially as entrepreneurs, right? You consider yourself an entrepreneur. Like I'm obviously an entrepreneur. I think it's also, you can, like, there's no 9 to 5 anymore, right? Like there's no boundaries on how much you work, when you work. You're always constantly connected. Like I definitely was the best person practicing my own advice at the beginning, because when you're building something new, I feel like you obviously invest even more so because you're making your own money, and it's not just like every 2 weeks you're getting a paycheck from an organization, right? Yeah,
exactly. So as an entrepreneur, you're responsible for delivering value to the marketplace in order to provide a valuable service in order to get compensation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what do you like, how is the process when you are starting to work with entrepreneurs in your coaching practice? Like, do you have like a framework? Your next act is, I think, kind of the framework that you're using, but can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways that I work with folks, and it all starts with, everyone's an individual and everyone has kind of their own individual challenges and difficulties. But in the long run, it's really doing the evaluation and finding out, what the mindsets are that need to start to change. And generally, it is really about kind of the commitment to taking, some more time off, to finding those parts of their work that they're really, really, really uniquely qualified at, and working to understand how to delegate more and more of the stuff that they don't need to be doing. I also work to like help people understand that, happiness is something that we start to put into place now, instead of, it's going to be what drives your success instead of the result of your success.
Yes.
And the framework for happiness that I help people with, there's an on-ramp, and the on-ramp is, kind of like, basic self-care stuff, right? So it's sleep better. Like sleep is one of the best performance enhancing drugs that we have. And it's also something that we can brag about. I only slept 5 hours for the last 2 weeks because I'm so busy. But sleeping more is actually going to improve performance tremendously. Move more, whatever level of exercise, we have, it's super important that we're including that. Work on nutrition, work on a meditation practice, work on gratitude. So that's the on-ramp. And then the pillars for happiness are learning and growing, connections, right? Our community, our relationships, our contributions, a commitment to blazing your own trail is the third one. So it's about following a curiosity, finding what our purpose is, why we're doing what we're doing, and to really work within those unique gifts and talents that we have. And last is really working with the mindset of, making a commitment to enjoying the ride no matter what. So much of the world is very negative. And our own thoughts can be very negative when we're faced with adversity and problems. And successful entrepreneurs, like what they do is to solve problems. And the more successful you get, the bigger and the more difficult the challenges become. And it's easy to get very overwhelmed and to lose track that we have control of where we choose to put our attention and what thoughts we choose to pay attention to. And often it can get lost in just kind of the negativity that's around us a lot of times.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest challenges that probably people face, that I face as well, for sure, is like to switch from that negative thought process into a more positive mindset.
Yep.
How do you teach your clients on how to do that? Do you have like any secrets that you found really helpful in the past?
Yeah, so I start really by like my story. So 12 years ago, I'm a psychiatrist. I help other people to like help with their mindsets. And I was like completely drowning in negativity. Like all I could think about was how tired I was, how one day looked like the next day, and how my life was always going to be the same, just work, 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 work. Like it was very, very miserable and negative in my head. And what actually happened 12 years ago was that my twin sister had passed away from a brain tumor, and she passed away in August 2008. And the next month, I was looking at a picture of her, and it was just so striking to me how positive she had been through her illness, and how much love and gratitude and what grace she'd shown with such a terrible prognosis. And here I was, healthy and with a successful practice and alive, and she was dead. And I just threw a line in the sand and I said, no matter what, I'm going to enjoy things, no matter what. And instantaneously, I was able to put up blinders to the negative thoughts. You don't stop negative thoughts, right? So the thoughts are going to think themselves. But what we do have choice over are what thoughts we pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
So the negative thoughts, oh my gosh, I'm tired. This is dreadful. My day looks like it's going to be long, and there's no breaks. And I had to add 3 patients at the end of the day, and there's 15 calls I have to return. So instead of focusing on that negative part of the day, what I focus on is, who am I going to help next? Can I return a couple of phone calls between patients? Maybe there's going to be a break in the day. At the end of the day, how good it's going to feel when I finally go to bed, right? Like you have a choice of whether you're going to indulge those negative thoughts and just wallow in them, even under, a very, very hard day, or whether we're going to like grab on and really search hard for those thoughts that are more soothing and help us to have a better attitude during the course of the day. And we do really get to choose that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we work on is noticing that the thoughts aren't going to go away, but we get to choose the thoughts that we want to maintain.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. And how do you how is that connection to anxiety? I'm kind of curious because I feel like I definitely have anxiety, and I wake up sometimes in the morning and feel super anxious. Like I have this stomach, I feel super nervous, and I'm I just woke up, nothing happened yet in my day, and I'm obviously aware, right? That thoughts can steer that, but isn't it from a biochemical perspective, it's a lot harder than maybe to navigate those negative thoughts when you're already in this kind of high stress state?
Well, it can be definitely hard, but no matter what the circumstances, we can control our thinking. And I'll get back to the physical state too.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my favorite authors in books, and parts of the book are really hard to get through, but Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl,
Mm-hmm.
who was a psychiatrist who was in a concentration camp. And among the most difficult human circumstances. And he talked about and wrote about that, our ability to choose our attitude in any given set of circumstances is something that you can have even in a concentration camp. So it gets harder under circumstances, but not impossible. Now, when you do wake up and your body is betraying you, right? So right off the bat, before you even have a chance to think, you're already kind of twisted up with the anxiety and with the feelings. That's when you have to kind of work on doubling down on, I'm going to get through this day. This is just how my body is feeling. What are the things that I can do when my body is tense? And there's lots and lots of practices that we can employ, and people there's no end to the practices, right? But people find what works best for them. So whether it's taking time for 10 to 20 minutes of meditation, whether it's, kind of a breath practice in the morning, whether it's getting up and doing Tai Chi or yoga or stretching. I mean, there's many things that are available to us that don't have to be medications. I mean, sometimes it is medications as well, but with, a coach or a therapist, we can find those techniques so that we are empowered to use our body, to help combat that anxiety that we have with practices that, are freely available. And with the internet today, there's lots of talk about some of these practices as well, from like I said, meditation to breath work.
Of course. Yeah.
I'm curious,
Yeah.
what sort of practices do you find to be helpful when you're waking up like that?
I mean, I've established a really, I don't want to say strict, but like I have established a morning routine that I love myself. And that really helps me to stay centered, like, especially when, like, sometimes I have days when I feel, like when I have a hard time getting out of bed. And that really helps me to kind of get into that rhythm and find those like little moments of accomplishment. I like write, I journal, I practice gratitude. I drink some warm lemon water, and then some, usually I listen maybe to a book or a podcast, something that inspires me and that makes me help kind of shift my mindset from those negative thoughts to picking something up that basically, connects me to something more positive.
That's wonderful. And what people can take away from that is, you have found those things that help you. And what you've done is you've been kind of determined to say, I'm not just going to sit here and be miserable and feel miserable. There's something that I can do. And one of the secrets, I learned this from a psychologist, Wyatt Woodsmall. He said one of the secrets to high performers is that they're much quicker to try something different than try harder when something's not working. So if your morning's like terrible, rather than trying harder with, techniques that aren't working for you, like try different faster, like try something different. Add, if it's not the lemon water, then, do a smoothie with, green juice. But keep trying those things. Don't give up. There's a way, there is hope, and things can change.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And so what I was reading on your website was that you really help entrepreneurs as well with procrastination. I was very intrigued by that. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So among other things, we all procrastinate. Right. So 100% of us, it doesn't matter whether you're the president of the United States, there's going to be those things that we procrastinate on. And I think that there's two challenges. Number one is, as high achievers, what we're going to focus on is those things that we're not doing well at. Right. So we're going to be measuring our progress by, what did I mess up today? I didn't return this phone call. I didn't do this, thing that I was supposed to do. But we're very hard on ourselves as high performers. And what we don't do is to give ourselves credits for what we've actually done. So, what I talk about a lot of times is, rather than measuring against, this ideal day where you do everything like you're supposed to, right? And we never have that ideal day. It's really, put that yardstick and put it behind you and measure progress that you're making, and give yourself the grace that, of course, you're not going to get everything done that you're supposed to. So we sort of redefine procrastination in some ways. And then we take a look at the procrastination list instead of a to-do list, right? We look at your procrastination list, and we pick the 4 things that are going to make the biggest difference if we just kind of put that as our to-do list. And then instead of having a to-do list of 10 things, we have a procrastination list, and we're just going to like focus on one piece of that list, and get very clear like we will get super clear what are the steps that are required. So if the list is, I have to start, a new coaching program for my clients, a group coaching program, like that's very daunting. And I wait and I wait and wait. So if instead of that, I break it down into like steps, I need to do research on, what's the platform that I'm going to use? How am I going to collect money? How often am I going to deliver the coaching, information? We can break it down into much more organic steps that someone can take, and it becomes less overwhelming. And, the cognitive load that it takes to take on that task, gets broken down into steps by steps that are much easier.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was a program manager in my previous career. So I love that process. And I think even just from the reflection and being more mindful about like how I'm doing things and how I'm operating, I think one of my biggest eye openers is still to this day is that I feel like I always put a lot of pressure on myself to do these things. But I'm a lot more aware now and just like knowing that like I am getting these little tasks done and they still bring me to the end goal at some point. So yeah, I think it's always a powerful reminder.
Little by little. Yeah. And the other thing that we look at is, is it a task that needs to be done at all? Right.
Yeah.
And is it a task that needs to be done by you? Is it a task that, is not, in your, it's something you love doing. And then is it something that, we can find who can do it for us, not how can I do that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think especially as an entrepreneur, that's really important.
Yeah.
And I was also reading on your website about adversities. So I was kind of curious to learn more about what you see the most common adversities are and how to overcome those.
I don't know that there's a most common adversity, but here's my framework for adversity is this is planet Earth. And on planet Earth, there's gravity and there's always going to be falls and boo-boos and broken bones. And, on a planet with gravity, there's always going to be adversity and friction. So, a big part of the mindset is kind of the understanding that it is normal to have obstacles in our lives. And the obstacles are things that we don't have control over. What we have control over is really about overcoming obstacles and our mindset around that. So it becomes really a practice of working on our acceptance of the world as it is, right? Not, so rather than, like who put, that sign for that on that road that was so hard to see, who put it there? It's like, well, those things are going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And instead of focusing on, why is it that way? It's like, I guess let me figure out how I'm going to like find my way back to where I need to go when I got lost because someone put the sign in a dumb place. And really looking at maintaining our, attitude as these obstacles are put into place. And then as entrepreneurs, the other piece is that, obstacles are building blocks for differentiating ourselves and for overcoming problems. Like entrepreneurs solve problems for other people, and that's what they get paid for. And so without those obstacles, we would have a hard time, not having services to provide for others. In our own lives, it's really, again, about the acceptance that these things are going to come up, and then how are we going to deal with them? Because it's inevitable. It's inevitable. There's going to be betrayals. There's going to be losses. There's going to be illness. We're going to have migraines or back pain. And these things are going to happen. And rather than, wish that they weren't
feeling
there.
defeated by that. Yeah.
It's, acceptance of the world as it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really love that shift in perspective. I think that was one of the biggest things that I've learned from cognitive behavioral therapy is just like that shift in perspective.
Yeah.
That's so powerful. It's just like
Yeah.
you can think this way, but you can also think that way. And, that
It's
makes
huge.
yeah.
And in dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a very close cohort of the cognitive behavioral therapy, the term they teach is radical acceptance, right?
When we jumped on the call, I was saying to you, I'm really, really impressed by your bookshelf in the background, because not only do you have a lot of books, but I can also see that there's a lot of books that you have 5 times and 6 times and 7 times. Tell us more about all of these books there.
And one of the things, so I'll tell you the journey. When I was burnt out, one of the things I did is I cut out negativity, and I stopped listening to the news. I stopped listening even to sports radio. I loved sports, but so much of the sports radio had even gotten, it was about the drama and like the nonsense instead of human excellence. And I said, I don't want to listen to that anymore. So I started listening to podcasts and audiobooks and things like that. And whenever I listened to someone who I loved their ideas and I loved what they were doing, or I read a book or I listened to a book, I committed to buying, 5 copies, 10 copies, 20 copies, depending on the book. Some books I've bought, 50 to 100 copies at a time, so that I could give them away to people. And it's one of my ways of sort of practicing gratitude, and then also being able to share with others things that I have found useful and helpful in my own life. So anyone who comes over to the office, like some of my coaching clients when I was doing live workshops, but I'll just like go through and like put books in people's hands.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
What are the books that you bought 50 to 100 times?
One of my favorite books is a book by Cal Newport that's called So Good They Can't Ignore You.
I've heard about it.
Oh, it's a great book, and it's got great stories in there. At the end of each chapter, there's like a Reader's Digest synopsis of the chapter, so you don't even have to read the whole book, but do it because of the stories. But he talks about building career capital, and career capital is getting good at a aspect of work. So as a psychiatrist, I've gotten good at knowing people and being a good psychiatrist. An engineer gets good at engineering, an archaeologist gets good at learning archaeology, but you develop this skill set that differentiates yourself from a large part of the population. There's not 50% of the population that's a psychiatrist or an engineer. There's lots of them, but we still have differentiated ourselves. Then you have a big purpose, like what is it that your ideal life and your ideal vision for using your skill set would look like? And then you take what he calls adjacent possibles, steps into the adjacent possibles. And adjacent possibles are small bets, small side steps that do not involve very much time or energy or money, but to learn new capabilities. So an example is when I was first starting to look at what I was interested in doing down the road besides psychiatry, I thought maybe I'd like to, develop some information products about bipolar type 2, because people don't know that much about bipolar type 2. It's often misdiagnosed, might be helpful. So my small side projects involved putting on some conferences locally. I just kind of sent out notices that I'd like to talk about it. And I filled up, some hotel rooms or conference rooms and gave talks for several months on bipolar type 2. I learned how to film and do some editing, which, took some time, but not that much time. And I did some YouTube videos on bipolar type 2. So if you look up bipolar, and it's capital I, and Dr. Astruc, my bipolar 2 videos are still out on YouTube. So I stepped out in this way, and it didn't end up amounting to what I really wanted to do, but I learned some things. I learned I didn't want to be editing videos. I learned I love to be in front of people and teaching, right? I didn't know that about myself, but you keep trying these adjacent possibles, and you build up knowledge, you build up networks. And as you're doing that with your career capital and the vision of what you want in the long run. So for me, what I want in the long run is really to have, the ability to talk to people really about putting happiness into the center of their life and their decision making, to make happiness what drives success instead of the outcome of success. And it starts with this small group with entrepreneurs. But I have all these adjacent side steps that I do, podcasts and whatnot. And I don't know where the lightning's going to strike, but if I'm always kind of working towards those goals and building out those adjacent possibles, bless you,
Thank you.
then it's inevitable that I'm going to have a better and better chance of making that happen.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, great. Any other
other favorite books? There's a book that recently I bought a lot of copies of, which is Who Not How by Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy. Really very helpful book about delegation. It's a great book about delegation. And one of my favorite business books that I recommend to everybody is Creativity Inc.
I've heard
Creativity
about
Inc. Yeah, that's great. And what else? Good to Great. Super classic, super awesome book. Dan Collins.
Yeah. I'm like trying to see if I can like read some of the book titles in your background. I see tiny.
Yeah. So Good to Great over there. Tiny Habits is a book about habit formation by B.J. Fogg. That's an excellent book. And I'm pretty sure Creativity Inc. is in there as well. So yeah.
Have you written any books yourself?
I'm in the process of writing my first book. It should be coming out at the end of the year, beginning of next year, but it's happiness rules. It's what we're talking about right now, how to put happiness at the center of your life. And it's going to be geared more like there's a target niche. It's for entrepreneurs and who are working hard and have burnout, but it's going to have all of the happiness rules and ways of applying what we're talking about here to put happiness back into the center of our lives.
Very cool. Very nice. Well, Manuel, it was such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time today. And if people would like to learn more about you, how can they best get in touch with you or learn more about you?
If you go to my website, manuelastruc.com, that's ManuelAstruc.com. There's a pop-up that will show up, and if you put your name into that, you're going to get, number one, a video about our greatest superpower. And our greatest superpower, in my opinion, is our ability to choose. We get to choose how we think. We get to choose how we show up. But there's a video that you'll get for that. But you'll also then get enrolled into like a weekly newsletter that I put out about podcasts and things that I'm reading and finding super interesting for folks. And also every morning, there'll be a link to my morning musings. I do 3 to 5 minutes on Facebook Live, and you don't even have to be on Facebook. It'll just link to it. But it's all about leadership and success and happiness.
Okay. Very great. And last question, I'm curious, where's your accent from?
I was born in Spain, and my family moved to Richmond, Virginia when I was 5 years old. Okay. So there's 7 siblings. I'm the only one with an accent that's left, so it's a little Spanish. I don't know why whatever. So I have a little Spanish accent and a little Richmond.
It's great. It's a great accent. I love it. Awesome, Manuel. Well, thank you so much. I wish you all the best, and I hope that a lot of people will reach out to you or like check out the resources that you just mentioned.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the work that you do too. It's great.
Thank you.